All right, welcome back. Thank you for holding on with that brief break. After the broadcasters, we now have Commissioner Knight from the Department of Liquor and Lottery. And we're just going to go over some materials that are relevant to us crafting our budget adjustment memo for the Appropriations Committee. Commissioner, how are you?
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. Mr. Chair, thank you. How many?
Please. Yeah.
Okay, this should be relatively straightforward. So we have a revised projections in the liquor control fund. What we basically is a zeroing out. So we're recalibrating what had been a deficit. We had some extra funds, as you heard from Commissioner Gresham. And so is the fiscal policy of the Department of Finance and Management to zero out some deficits. And so that's why you are seeing a shift in the amount of money that was initially projected for the liquor control funds. I want to give you a little background on the deficit. This is something that I inherited. So it's gone back through, I think, 2018. There's a couple reasons for the deficit. One is the long-term liabilities. So when the GASB rules required the state to start planning for those pension and long-term liabilities, we started to see a deficit. The other is that in prior years, the direct app, that's the amount of money transferred from the liquor control fund to the general fund, exceeded the profits. So what we will do moving forward, which makes sense, is you take the revenue that the liquor fund generates, less expenses, less the long-term liabilities, equals the net profit. And that's what we would be transferring moving forward. The other thing to note is that during this COVID years, right, we had the COVID years, 21, 22, 23 on the budgets. You see there was a lot more sales. We saw that people were consuming more alcohol. Bars and restaurants were closed, so there were a lot more sales. People were consuming at home, and we saw more tax revenue. So we're starting to see some of that, what's the term?
Leveling off.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So we're starting to see more normal. Post-COVID, we're starting to see a little bit more normal consumption, I would say, or pre-COVID consumption, and therefore the tax revenues. What we've seen in the last couple of years, and I think I talked about it last year, I've been talking about it for probably a year and a half, is that people are consuming less alcohol. So the legal drinking age young population consumes less alcohol. Sometimes they have low ABV products, sometimes they have non-alcoholic products. And so in general, across the country, we're seeing less alcohol consumption, which means less sales, which means less tax revenue from alcohol. In states that have legalized cannabis, we're seeing less. So some of that you're seeing the adjustment is reflected in sort of what's happening in the market. And I will point out that one of the things that we are doing, we meaning my team, is we're focusing on the operating expenses. Obviously, right, you've got revenue, you've got expenses. So if the revenues are going down, you need to be mindful of the operating expenses and make sure that they're not increasing higher than they need to be. And so I will just say that the last two budgets under my watch had an average operating increase of 1.3%. So that would have been the FY23 and FY24 budgets. Prior to that, for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, the average operating increase was 5.74%. I have an excellent financial director, and she keeps us lean and mean. So just giving you the confidence that moving forward, this department is not going to operate the liquor control fund in a deficit, and we're going to continue to look at our operating costs and make sure that they are as low as they can be.
Representative Hooper.
Are we charging the same thing per liter as neighboring states?
So the suppliers, the people that are making the product, they give us the price, And then we have a markup to that. And so I would have to look and see what New York is charging versus New Hampshire versus Massachusetts. It depends on the product, it depends on the size, it depends on the category.
And who charges sales tax?
Pardon me?
And who charges sales tax?
Yeah, right. New Hampshire doesn't have sales tax. So, so that explains the liquor control fund zeroing out the deficit.
Absolutely, yeah, raise your hand, I'll go.
Because I'm new to this.
Yes,
So the operators of the 802 liquor stores purchase the liquor, the agents, do they purchase the liquor from you? Or they're purchasing it from their supplier? Are you
No,
the supplier?
we are the supplier. So
You
we're
are
the
the
distributor.
Okay.
So in the state
I
of
never knew
Vermont.
that. I thought they just,
Beer, wine, private sector,
right,
and RTDs now.
okay. And liquor is,
Spirits.
spirits is, that's why it's 802 spirits.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So as a control state, the department purchased the alcohol, distilled spirits and fortified wine from the suppliers. Those are the Diageo and Campari and all of those, right? All those companies. And we purchase it. And then we ask the 802 Spirits stores to sell it on our behalf. So we have a contract with the 802 Spirits stores and we give them a commission. We own the product, we meaning the department, and the state owns the
And do
product.
you control the markup that those?
Yeah.
vendors- Okay, so
Yeah.
every store should be selling the same product.
Every store is selling it at the same price, which is different
Than
than
beer.
Representative Hooper was alluding to. If you are in New York State or Massachusetts State, which is not a control state, you as the wholesaler charge your price, your markup, and then the retailer charges their markup. So when you go into a store, that's why you can see a variety of prices for the product. Depends on where you are and where you are in Massachusetts, what product you're buying and who's the distributor. And that's how beer, wine, cider, and low ABV RTDs work, which is low ABV alcohol by volume, RTD is ready to drink cocktails.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I understand basically like how that deficit came to be over the course of time. So your recommendation though is for budget adjustment that we just do essentially a smaller transfer
Correct.
to fill, just to get
Zero it
to
out.
zero out the deficit, get it done in one foul swoop and just
Correct.
move on with life.
Yes, and that was the recommendation of the Commissioner of Finance and Management because we had a surplus and there was a recommendation to we shouldn't be operating with deficit funds. So let's zero it out and move forward. And I'm trying to instill in you the confidence in me to be able to move forward so that we wouldn't be operating in a deficit.
Understood,
That's my job.
understood. Thank you.
Yes. Would you like me to talk about sports wagering?
Hey, we're here.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a minor reduction in the projection of the revenue coming from sports wagering. I think I talked about this last time, didn't I? So do I need
Yeah,
to
we
talk about it?
touched on it. Yeah, so just like a little refresher, a little
Yeah.
bit more detail in a formal capacity for the purpose of the memo.
Yes, absolutely. So FY 24, the very first fiscal, we had 6 months. We launched in January, ended the fiscal in June. We had projected 3.2 million in revenue as a revenue share, and we ended up with 3.5. So that was the basis by which we were projecting what our revenue we thought might be for FY 25. Again, the fiscal goes July to June. Keep in mind, of course, the sports wagering is cyclical. And so we came out of the gate in January, we were during playoffs and Super Bowl and Taylor Swift and forgot his name, the football player. They were all, in the media and people were excited about it, right? Betting on Kansas City. So what we see then, once the Super Bowl is over, it drops significantly in terms of wagering. There's a little bit of basketball, there's a little baseball, and then there's not a lot much in the summer, and now we see it ramping up again. And so what we saw for the calendar year of 2024, which is not how we do business in the state, but I'm just giving you that as a point of reference, we had $6.3 million in revenue. So as I started to look at the fiscal come July, and I'm starting to look at the numbers every week, every month, and I'm seeing that the increase, the revenue share we would be seeing on those monthly reports wasn't kind of gonna get us to 7 million. So we looked at the numbers, and we, revised our projections because we would rather come in with a lower, more conservative, modest projections and exceed that than not, meet the expectations. So we revised the expectations from 7 million to 6.1 million. Why are you laughing down there?
No, I'm just agreeing with you because like we had this
I mean,
conversation.
Throwing me off my game.
No, I'm flashing back on a conversation that we had late in the session with our friends at appropriations when we saw these upward
Right.
numbers. And they were like, hey, like, do you think it's gonna hit this? And I was like, no. Well, we both agreed that just keep it where it
Keep it.
is. It's the first year. So I'm laughing, and, you know, look,
Okay.
being reflective in this moment with that conversation.
So part of the reason, and I talked about this at appropriations, is that the winning payouts are, people are winning more bets, let's put it that way. And part of that is in the NFL, they're betting on the favorites. So NFL has favorite teams to win. I don't know how this betting works as a better because I don't bet. But the idea is that the Kansas City Chiefs favored to win whatever game. And so I, as a better, I'm gonna wager a bet on that and it's gonna hit, so I'm gonna win my bet. God bless you. Which means that as the winning payouts increase, the adjusted gross wagering revenue decreases. So as more people are winning, the state actually earns less revenue. But that's what we talked about before, is that obviously if these are Vermonters that are winning, they have some extra cash, right? The wings for everybody. Right. So that's what's happening there. Fiscal 25 year to date, we're at 3.38 million. That's through like mid-January. So we still have,
Extra profit so far?
no, that's the revenue share. Yeah. That's what the state is earning from sports wagering. So,
But keep in mind, this is the most heavily wagered portion of the year with football playoffs.
right,
And you also had college football thrown in there with their playoff structure. So this is, and that's kind of why we cautioned folks last year, because it was in this window of time
Right.
through, I don't know, March Madness beginning.
Right,
And we were
right.
like, Joe, get married
Right.
with this money,
Right.
because it's not going to be this consistent throughout the course. of the
there
year.
was a thought that whatever we earned in January, we were gonna see replicated every month. And we explained that, no, that doesn't work that way because January has the playoff. Just to give you an idea, is the Super Bowl and the playoffs and NFL. NFL really drives a lot of the sports wagering. So that fiscal year to date, I said $3.38 million the state's earned in revenue share. 2.66 is coming from the NFL. That's at 78% of the revenue comes from the NFL.
Wow.
Wagering. So just to keep that in mind, yes, we should see some good activity January with the playoffs. And then, as the chair mentioned, we go into March Madness, but then it really starts to decline. Although tennis apparently is
Baseball, so then you gotta wait till the
a
baseball.
little bit of baseball, yeah, but people are not wagering on that.
Sport though, it's popular.
NASCAR definitely probably would be, right?
Nope. It's really
Football.
football and basketball driven, but
Yeah.
more collegiate on the basketball side. than football.
Yeah, even in the Olympics, we didn't see much wagering, it's just people are really, a lot of sports wagering is people are sports enthusiasts. If you're a real Lions fan or you're a real Kansas City fan, you're engaging in those games and you're wagering because it's fun and you know the players. And so that's why we're seeing a lot more. And the operators obviously are investing in advertising on those games. So you see a lot of activity there. Any other questions?
No, I don't think I don't personally do any of the members at the table. No.
No, sort of this was brought up on the introduction to you.
Yes, I know, I feel like I'm repeating myself.
That's okay. And like I said,
I'm saying the same thing, right?
like I said, Representative, we were just moving through this for the sake of our budget memo, so this is just a little bit more of a formal conversation aside from the introduction we already did for appropriations and budget adjustment. Yeah, so thank you so much, Commissioner.
Very well.
We were able to do this today while you're
Yes,
already in
thank
the
you.
building.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Rue.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Chris Roop, from the Joint Fiscal Office. It is very difficult to follow Commissioner Knight, because I think she hit all of the, high notes and I had very little to add to, her remarks. The commissioner, your chair reached out to me last night and just asked if I could come in and walk the committee through 3 items in the BAA that are relevant to the committee's jurisdiction. And posted on your committee page under today's date and under my name, I put a little 1-pager together that just summarizes those 3 things. There is also the full BAA text as recommended by the governor. It is long. Please don't print the whole thing. The good news is all of the items that are relevant to today's discussion are on the same 2 pages of that document. So they're all in section 51, which I believe is around page 35, 36. The only other item I really wanted to hit on here in my remarks, which Commissioner Knight rightfully didn't because she does not oversee this, is there is a proposed increase to the transfer from the Cannabis Regulation Fund. So that's the fund that receives money from the excise tax on cannabis, the 14% excise tax. The budget, when it was constructed, assumed that there would be $12 million available in that fund to transfer to the general fund. And it turns out there's 15.4 million and change. So the transfer amount is proposed to be increased by $3.4 million. And per statute, 30% of the revenue is earmarked for substance misuse or substance abuse prevention programming. You will see that 30% increase reflected in B313 of the bill. So you'll I put some little annotations here on this page just to give you all a cheat sheet to remind you all of what these things do and why.
Okay, so with the CCB component, so because that's an overage,
Yeah.
does that need to be reflected in the memo with us as a?
It is your call on what you want to opine on or not. I brought it to the committee's attention because it's sometimes good to hear good news and not just bad. And it's within your purview. You all might want to hear how things are going.
I appreciate that perspective. Yeah. And with, so everything presented, the document itself speaks very clearly, so thank you for that. So this gives us something to work off of with the content for the memo. I really appreciate you finding the time to like run us through this. Driving the first BAA as a chair is definitely a little intimidating.
It's a fairly long bill, and I know this committee doesn't live in the appropriation weeds as much as your colleagues on the other side of the wall behind me. But if you all have questions about the BAA in general, just feel free to ask.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We're gonna have a conversation with DPS on Thursday. I spoke with Chief Recovery Officer today about some other items. So I feel like the conversations are taking shape for us to put the memo together, and perhaps just maybe once I'm on like a V2, maybe I'll just reach out to you to make sure I'm using words correctly.
Happy to help the committee.
I had a question about something else in the D section, the D101 section and we were unsure, maybe the tobacco litigation special fund. Is that our committee jurisdiction? Do we know?
That I believe, even though it's tobacco, that litigation fund, I think might be a human services thing.
The Aura Health.
Yeah. In the time, I mean, we've served the same amount of time together. We've never really had a conversation about that fund. And we have handled the Department of Liquor and Lottery portfolio. So I think it's worth asking a committee member in one of those, or both of those rooms, just to make sure. But I don't believe that's something that we engage with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think what I know about that item, the budget as originally passed included a $3 million transfer from that fund to the general fund. Had that full $3 million gone through, it would have put the tobacco litigation settlement fund in a deficit at the end of the year. The general fund quite frankly, doesn't need the $3 million right now based on the revenue performance and the revenue forecast. So that's why finance and management is proposing to eliminate the transfer just keep the 3 million in that tobacco fund.
Thanks for the explanation.
All right, do we have anything else for Mr. Root?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that was all we were gonna ask about.
All right, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, gentlemen in the gallery. Appreciate you more than you know. So. All right, folks, just to run through what tomorrow looks like while everybody's here.
Live? Yeah. Just questions still.
Yeah, we're still, yep. So in the morning, we're gonna have some folks from the cannabis industry in just to do introductions. We're still pulling some names together with who those individuals are. And then we have Mr. Busa coming in. He sent us an email a little while ago. He's a little concerned about some inclement weather. So he may Zoom in instead of be in person. We shared the file with all of you with the document submissions that he gave us over the weekend. We broke it up into different buckets. So there was at least sort of a distinction to the subject matter within the document submitted. And so I just asked that you give some time with those documents, because tomorrow is going to be a very, very dense and a very, very long-awaited piece of testimony and engagement with one of the individuals impacted by this election snafu. So we're going to do that, break for an hour, break for lunch, come back for about an hour, hour and a half. And because Mr. Booth is sort of acting as he's presenting the case for himself, but also speaking to his perspective as a candidate, we wanted to offer the same sort of candidate space to Representative Cooper. So we got him coming in loosely around 2:30, just to give us a little bit of perspective from his lens. Then we got floor 3, and that's probably, we might have a little bit of bill activity, but keep an eye on things. We have a couple of other conversations around BAA that I don't necessarily think we need to have be testimony, but just keep an eye out for us to maybe come back here at like 3:30 for a half hour. If we have to take testimony on something real quick, I apologize for the last minute, but we are just trying to make sure we are getting this memo dialed in correctly. Thursday, we have a big slug of Department of Public Safety. A piece of that is Richard Hallenbeck, the Director of Finance. There's about $5.6 million worth of budget adjustment with those folks. So within this introduction, and hi, how you doing with all of Commissioner Morrison's team, we are going to mix a little BAA testimony into that as well. So beyond that, I don't want to get out over my skis. Then we have the Sheriff's Association coming in after that. And then please make note of the 1 o'clock on Thursday, where we have Tucker and Betsy Ann coming in to give us an analysis on what was presented by the two candidates. And then we have a couple of other thoughts as to who to bring in for testimony after that. But this is the testimony that we're going to get from Tucker and Betsy Ann, I think, is really going to give us a good perspective on this Bennington One conversation about how we started shaping our decision. So moving some dense pieces of this week has been a big goal. We've been very open with the public that we want to try and at least have a solid frame of where we're going with this by the first week of February. And guess what next week is? So although we were a little delayed, I still feel like we are on target.
What is next week?
First week of
February.
Oh, and then you said, guess what next week is?
That's what you're saying there.
Yeah.
I thought it was
It's already the first week of February, and we were really hoping to start like being able to hone in the Bennington One conversation by the first week of February. So the Betsy Ann components, and then we'll talk about testimony after that. But any questions?
No.
Nope. We're all good. All right.